Are you afraid by making small deposits, investing, that you're not going to have enough money in the future? I've had a lot of comments on a recent video I did about investing simply $10 a day, how that could make you $1 million when you retire. Had a lot of people talk about, well, in 30 years, $1 million won't be that much. I'm here to show you a different approach to how that same $10 a day, but how you are going to make differences. It was just an example of how starting today is so important. Not to wait, not to always say, oh, I'll get to it tomorrow. Start with the small amount today. And I'm going to show you with some examples of how you increase that and how that even increases your net worth down the road. Stay tuned as we dive into a surefire way to build your wealth. Thank you for joining me on Simply Money. We are here to help provide you financial literacy, to help you achieve your financial freedom and give you the education tools you need to make wise decisions. We're going to start out with some assumptions that you're going to be investing $200 a month and you're going to do that for 30 years. And I'm going to show you what those amounts will turn out to be. We're going to use a portfolio visualizer and see what those amounts could lead to in the future. Here's the portfolio visualizer. We're going to put in $200 as the initial amount. You're going to contribute a fixed amount periodically, and that fixed amount right here is $200. So every month you're contributing $200, and I have the inflation adjusted put on. I have the inflation adjustment put on, so it's going to show in future dollars. We're going to scroll down here and show you, I am just using FXAIX, an S&P 500 index fund, as an example. This is not financial advice for you to go out and buy FXAIX. I am a proponent of index funds. I think an S&P 500 index fund should be a strong portion of your portfolio, but I'm not telling you this is the one you should buy. I like it. It has a very low expense ratio. It's performed really well over the years. So this is one I like to use as an example. I'm just putting 100% in this. Again, I don't think you should have just an S&P 500 index fund. You should have a little bit of diversification in some different sectors, but this is something I want to show just to keep apples to apples comparison. If we go down and we hit run simulation, it'll give us some information here. It shows us a lot of the 10th, 25th, 50th, 75th, and 90th percentile. That means if the S&P 500 returned its historical return on the 10th percentile versus the 90th percentile and some in between, it gives you some variance of what kind of the highs and lows could be of this. I usually go right in the middle. It may be a little bit lower, it may be a little bit higher, but this again, we're going to use the 50th throughout, just to keep it consistent. This is the part I like because it's a nice visual for people to see what is happening. We talk a lot on this channel about compound interest. You can see that there's not a lot of growth happening here. It's slowly building up, but you come down here around year 20 and you can see from the 10th to the 90th percentile, that's really changing. That's really accelerating the difference because a 10% versus a 14% return over 20 years makes a huge difference. We are going to stick with this 50th percentile right in the middle. As you can see, it's $288,000 after 20 years. For people who are like, oh, well, it's not going to work out, whatever. Worst case, 10th percentile, you're at $162,000. Again, that's worst case scenario, like the worst 20 years that the stock market's shown over its history. We're not going to focus on that. We're not going to focus on, oh, it's going to be the best return in the 90th percentile. We're going with 50th percentile where it's right down the middle. But what I want to do is show you at the end of 30 years, if you had the 50th percentile, you would have $1,156,000. Now, again, people were like, that's not that much. It's, not going to be a whole lot with inflation. So let's go ahead and hit this adjusted for inflation. So in today's dollars, that'd be like having $541,000. For a $200 a month investment, you have over $500,000 when you go to retire. Now, Just like you accuse me of saying, well, you're not thinking about inflation. It's not going to be worth $1 million down the road. It's only going to be worth 500,000. Well, likewise, if today you're only able to put $200 a month, guess what? In 20 years, you should be able to put $400 or $600 a month. But I'm going to use some figures without even factoring inflation on your income. We're going to just use some simple math and some simple changes. I want you to remember this number. We're not going to adjust for inflation. Don't shoot me. Don't get all crazy on me. Throw me your comments down. Let's talk about it. But here, we're going to just to stick with easy numbers. The 50th percentile in today's dollars would be $1.156 million. Okay, that's it. We're going to look at that. I want you to remember that number. Write it down. Make note of that number. But I also want to go back to year 15. I want you to remember right here at 15 years, you're at $134,000 at the 50th percentile. After 15 years, you should also be focusing on removing your debt. You should also be getting rid of interest payments to credit cards, student loans, any unsecured debt, car notes. You should have your cars paid off and then begin to build a bucket for your next car so you don't have to go back in debt when you need a new car. We're going to put 15 years as the mark that you're going to get yourself out of debt. Imagine if you don't have any debt. What we're going to do now is we're going to go back up here and we're going to change some of these assumptions. We're going to put that you have a balance of $134,000. We're going to pretend now we're 15 years down the road, but now you've freed up $700 extra between getting raises, removing debt, inflation, whatever you want to count as. You now have an extra $700 that you can invest. Add that to the 200, you're now investing $900 a month 15 years from now. We're going to change this. You've already done 15 years. So to get to 30 years, you need 15 years that we're assuming to 15 more years. We're going to scroll down here, same FXAIX index fund. We're going to scroll it down and we're going to look at a little difference here. Now, at the end of this 15 years, which would have been 30 years total, 15 years of $200 a month, and then 15 years of $900 a month, you now have $1.552 million. $1.5 million. You have $400,000 more dollars because you increased your contributions for the last 15 years. Again, we can hit this inflation adjusted. You're at $1 million. In today's spending power, that would give you $1 million down the road. It'd be like having $1 million today by making these strategic investments consistently over years. But I want to do one more thing, because you know what? You hear people talking about don't pay your house off, the interest rate's low, blah, blah, blah. There's a peace of mind not having a house note, owning your house. We can argue about that on another video about the math and how it makes more sense to keep the lower interest, whatever the case may be. But we're going to assume you take the advice, and by 20 years, the first 15 years, and now 5 more years, which would put us right here, you would have $347,000. You had those first 15 years plus 5 years of putting $900 a month. Now at 20 years of this, you have $347,000. We're going to change these assumptions now. We're going to pretend we're 20 years down the road. And what do we say? You had $347,000. But now you're not contributing $900 because you don't have a house payment. You've freed up another $1,000 a month. So $1,900 a month that you can invest because you don't have car notes. You don't have consumer debt, and you don't have a house note. Now you're putting $1,900 a month into investments. And it's been 20 years, so we only have 10 years left on our 30-year projection. Again, in FXAIX, watch what happens. Now for these last 10 years, from year 20, you're contributing $1,900. From year 1 to 15, you're contributing $200 a month. From year 15 to year 20, you're contributing $900 a month. And from year 20 to year 30, you're contributing $1,900 a month. And at 30 years, now you have $1.8 million. You're almost at $2 million. Again, I know, oh, that's not inflation adjusted. So let's go down here, hit inflation adjusted. In today's dollars, you have $1.45 million. You have $1.5 million because you started with today $200 a month, $10 a day when the stock market's open, making an investment consistently, dollar cost averaging. Meanwhile, you're working on getting out of debt. You're getting your budget in place. You're controlling your spending and you're putting that extra money in. And it's not going to wait until 15 years that you have $900 because it may go from 200 to 300, then to 500, then to 900. But we're just keeping it simple by increasing your investments. Look where you can be. $1.4 million in today's dollars, but comparing it, that's $1.8 million. Now, maybe it goes really bad and you only have $1 million. 30 years, we've had the worst 30 years in history in the stock market, and you get $1 million. Or maybe we have the best 30 years and you have $3 million. I wouldn't plan that. I also wouldn't plan the worst. That's why I go right here. I usually plan in the 25th to 50th percentile personally. That's me. I want to be reasonable, but I don't want to be scared. I don't want to be so hyper excited that I go up to the 90th percentile and think that's what's going to happen. I want to be sensible. I usually do my planning and projections, but I redo them so I can see where am I falling, and then I adjust. But see how making simple changes and increasing that, and that's not really counting you getting pay raises. Because what you're making today in 20 years, you'll be making more because of inflation. So you can increase the amount you're contributing. This is my encouragement to you. Leave me a like and subscribe to the channel if you're getting stuff out of these videos. Leave me comments on what you think about this and your thoughts on the portfolio visualizer. Grow your wealth today. Start today, even if it's small. It's never too small to get started. And thank you for joining me on Simply Money.